In the meantime, John Ikerd will present the work that she's done. There'll be a short video. Many of you remember John. He was our keynote address speaker 3 or 4 years ago, and tremendous advocate for sustainable farming across the country, an opponent to the industrial ag mode. I'm not going to go through all the list of his accomplishments, but we all know him as a tremendous speaker and a true authority, and he will speak to us on that. And the last thing that some of you may not know, since 4 years ago when he spoke here, John decided that he was going to move to Fairfield. And I've heard him mention several times to people when they asked him why he decided to move to Fairfield is that he's traveled all over the country and seen what industrial agriculture and CAFOs can do to small communities, and he wanted to be sure that he lived in a community where they were doing everything they could to fight that. So we're glad to have John here, and John is going to be glad to give some information about Lynn Henning, a personal friend of his.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you tonight. I'm really disappointed that I am up here tonight because I was looking forward to having Lynn here and having you hear what she had to say. I just repeat what Jim had to say. My wife and I wanted to move to a small community. I wouldn't have moved to a small community anywhere that didn't have a strong group that was fighting CAFOs. And JFAN is one of the best in the whole country. And I'm proud to be on the board of directors of JFAN. I'm also proud to have been on the board of directors and be on the board of directors of the SRAP, Social Responsible Agriculture Project, and they're fighting CAFOs all over the country. And we need people all over the country that are doing this good work. As I said, I'm really sorry that Lynn couldn't be here tonight because she is an outstanding person. And it would have been a real pleasure for you and a real joy for you to have heard her personally present her story. But I'm honored to be able to at least introduce her work to let you know a little bit about what she's done. And I'd like to start with the video to give you some idea of what a remarkable person that Lynn Henning really is. No, I can't. Oh, we move it.
Spread across the wide open landscape of Lenawee County, Michigan, a quilt-like patchwork of family farms has flourished for generations.
Dean is my husband of 30 years of marriage. He grew up on a family farm. He's always been on a family farm. And we've raised our children here since 1981.
But beginning in the late 1990s, this idyllic agricultural setting mutated into something toxic and damaging. The culprits were factory farms, concentrated animal feeding operations, known as CAFOs.
I like to refer to them as animal factories because the animals are nothing more than machines. They don't get to see the outdoors their entire life.
CAFOs can house between 700 and 1 million head of livestock in confined spaces. The animal excrement produced daily at a medium-sized factory farm is equal to a city of 70,000 people. Untreated waste is channeled into huge open pits. A toxic brew of feces, chemicals, hormones, bacteria, antibiotics, and blood creates noxious fumes and dangerous compounds. It is then sprayed as fertilizer, seeping into groundwater and local streams.
We've seen 12 CAFOs come in within a 10-mile radius of our farms, and we've got over 60 lagoons with over 400 million gallons of waste.
Lynn's own family have suffered maladies such as heart attacks, respiratory illness, and other symptoms attributed to the side effects of CAFO pollution.
There are 3 main gases that are airborne from the CAFO operations, and those are methane, hydrogen sulfide, and ammonia as a respiratory irritant.
In 2000, after runoff polluted a state park lake, the Hennings were falsely blamed as the whistleblowers. But this accusation only prompted them into action.
We did water sampling, take pictures of our meters to show violations. We were willing to go the extra mile and sharing the information.
The people around here don't want money. What they want is the pollution to stop. And you can do it. You give the enforcement agencies the power to write a ticket and close them down until they can clean up their act.
As a Sierra Club water sentinel, Lynn often traveled up to 150 miles a week, collecting data that eventually made it to the state's Department of Environmental Quality, which issued hundreds of citations.
The citizens are our eyes and ears, and Lynn has been tremendously valuable.
In 2008, due in large part to Lynn's perseverance, a CAFO operation was denied a permit for the first time ever in Michigan. It was a major victory for Lynn and her organization. But Lynn's work has not come without risk. Her car is often followed or forced off the road, and recently gunfire shattered a window at a family member's house.
We had dead animals left on our front porch. We had skunks, possum, and raccoon left in the mailbox, and none of it worked.
Lynn just does not quit. I mean, she keeps going. If there's something happening, she goes and checks it out. She's really been able to have a broad effect on the issue.
Lynn now hopes her legacy will be cleaner, more regulated, and sustainable agricultural practices.
I think we need to train our children to raise food for the next generation. And if there was a case where a CAFO could run properly, they would have to put animals out on pasture where the family farmer has raised food for generations.
For outstanding environmental achievement in North America, the 2010 Goldman Environmental Prize is awarded to Lynn Henning, Clayton, Michigan.
Lynn Henning is just an outstanding example of the people all across this country who've had enough, and they're standing up and they're saying no more to CAFOs. She's a farmer, a longtime rural resident, and probably didn't give CAFOs a second thought until they started moving in all around her. But she wasn't an activist, and she wasn't necessarily an environmentalist until she found that she had to become both if she was going to protect her family, their health, and their quality of life. And at some point in time, she decided that she had had enough, and she was going to stand up and say no more to CAFOs, and she did something about it. She went out and started testing the waters, as you saw there. She was going to prove to the people that she wasn't an emotional, irrational housewife, that she knew what was going on. The CAFOs consistently, routinely violate the basic regulations in terms of polluting the water around them, and she proved that they were violating it, and she held them accountable for it. You know, Lynn Henning may be more committed and she may be more effective, as you saw there, but otherwise she's not all that different from the people that I've worked with over the years in 16 states and 4 provinces of Canada, and most recently in Wales in the United Kingdom. These are mostly family farmers, people that have been in rural communities all of their life. They're concerned about their families, but they're also concerned about agriculture, the future of agriculture, and the future of rural areas, and they've had enough. And they're standing up and saying no more. Now, there's a new public relations campaign, a multi-million-dollar public relations campaign that's funded by the CAFO corporations that are set out and bent on discrediting Lynn and other people like her. They label these people as being uninformed, irrational, emotional, but none of that could be farther from the truth. They're not out to destroy agriculture. They're trying to save agriculture. They're not against animal agriculture. They're just against this particular kind of animal production. Now, I readily admit that some of the people that I've come across have been emotional. For example, I was recently at a conference over in York, Pennsylvania, and I met a fellow there that was in a wheelchair, and he had a neurological problem that had basically disabled him, and his doctor had told him it was probably because he was living too close to a CAFO. And the doctor advised him that he could either move out of his home or he could prepare to die. At that same meeting, there was a mother that had a little girl that had that had respiratory problems that was keeping her from being able to function in school. And she had a little boy who had had a nasal infection and it ended up with him bleeding out of his ears. And all of that started when there was a hog farm next to him that expanded into a CAFO and was spreading manure outside their bedroom window. Yes, these people are emotional, but I would argue that emotion in defense of fairness is no vice, and indifference in the face of injustice is no virtue. These people may be somewhat emotional in some cases, but they're not irrational. They're not activists. They're not animal rightists, as they're labeled. I found the people through the years that I've worked to be intelligent and informed and thoughtful and compassionate and caring. These are people that know the difference between agriculture and industry, and they know the difference between a real farm and a factory farm. And they're committed to defending the integrity and protecting the integrity of agriculture and of rural communities. It's not the opponents of CAFOs that are foreigners in rural areas somehow that don't understand. These are the people that really do understand agriculture. They're the people that belong there, and they're the people that feel for ethical and moral reasons that they have to stand up and say no more to the CAFOs. The corporations now are in this PR campaign, they're using these young farmers and these families as front men. They're trying to create the illusion of authenticity by using these young farmers. And many of these young farmers have been brainwashed by the agricultural establishment, as I call it, into believing that this is the future of farming, that this is the future of agriculture. But nothing could be farther than the truth. First, this is not farming. This is a factory. These operations smell like factories. They pollute like factories. They're industry. They're not agriculture, and they're virtually unregulated. Whereas other industries are regulated, they're not. The regulations that are there are inadequate, and they're rarely enforced, as you saw in Lynn having to enforce the laws and report on that. And second, you know, the people that are farming or people that are producing in CAFOs, they're not real farmers. They're basically, through these comprehensive production contracts, are turned into something actually less than serfs on their own farming operation. And when the corporations, when they no longer serve the interests of the corporations, they'll be cast aside with no regard for their future or for the future of agriculture. It's time to say no more to this kind of future for agriculture. This big corporate PR campaign, multi-million dollars, I think it's $30 million the first year, they set up to defend, and they say on their website that they're trying to defend industrial agriculture against the growing public concern and public resistance, and CAFOs are the epitome of industrial agriculture. They point out 4 areas in which they're trying to defend industrial agriculture: on the safety and wholesomeness of food, on environmental impacts, on animal welfare, and on the economic necessity of having these CAFOs. Now, you know, that used to be the CAFOs promoters would call for good science. They don't talk about good science anymore. They've turned to PR because the scientific evidence is growing that provide an indictment on every one of those counts. They claim that the meat, milk, and eggs that are produced in CAFOs are safe and wholesome, but the scientific studies and the government statistics show a very different story. Recalls of contaminated meat and milk and eggs that are coming out of the CAFOs have become almost routine. Within the last few days, there's been a salmonella outbreak that was associated with chicken that sickened hundreds of people all across this country, and several strains of the bacteria were resistant to a number of different antibiotics. And it should be no surprise, because these CAFOs are ideal breeding grounds for antibiotic resistance in the routine feeding of antibiotics. And among those resistance are MRSA, MRSA, which now kills more people in the United States than does AIDS. Guilty is charged. The PR campaign says that CAFO operators are good stewards of the environment. Again, the statistics, many of them coming from EPA, tell a very different story. A recent report, 35,000 miles of streams in 19 states that have been polluted by CAFOs. They say, well, it was worse before we had CAFOs with the independent operators out here, but that's not true. We've had a tripling of the number of impaired waters in Iowa during the years from the early 90s to now, when we had the transition from independent family hog farms into CAFOs. Guilty is charged. The PR campaign says that CAFOs are humane operations. They keep them in comfort in these confined facilities. Then why do we have a movement all across, and we have a law in Iowa that says it's illegal to take pictures in CAFOs? What are they hiding if they're treating the animals so well? CAFOs are basically concentration camps, if you will, where there's too many animals in too small a space to give any form of dignity or respect to the animals that is essential to humane treatment. Guilty is charged. The PR campaign says that CAFOs are an economic necessity, that we have to have CAFOs to feed a hungry world. Again, I can tell you that as an agricultural economist, it's absolutely not true. We're not producing any more meat, milk, or eggs than we could have produced in the past or that we could produce in the future. We're just doing it with far fewer farmers. What we have today is a situation where the smaller farmers could actually produce as much or more as we're doing today, but it would require more farmers to produce it. And what's wrong with having more farmers? The prices of products to the consumers have not gone down. They've gone up as the number of CAFOs have gone up. Those are facts. Those are USDA statistics. It's not the consumer that benefits. It's not the farmer that benefits. It's certainly not rural communities that benefit economically. It's the investors in the large agribusiness corporations. Those are the only ones that benefit economically from this kind of agriculture. You know, the PR is right in one respect. There is growing resistance as people become aware of what's going on out here. Rural people, urban people all across society are standing up and saying, no more CAFOs. I think we're in the midst of a great battle today. This could be the build-up to the battle of this ongoing war of CAFOs that's coming out. This is a battle that we need to continue to fight if we're ultimately going to win. We've got to fight it on all the fronts. We've got to fight to enforce the laws that are out there through water testing and various other places. We've got to continue to fight to have stronger regulations on CAFOs. We've got to take we've got to take legal action against governments when they refuse to enforce the regulations that we have. And we've got to have nuisance lawsuits by people, private individuals, when all else fails and they continue to pollute your environment and threaten your health and your quality of life. Rural people have every right to stand up for the basic human rights of self-determination and self-defense. The people down here of Batavia and Eldon with this CAFO that's going in, the 5,000 hog CAFOs going down there, will generate as much toxic biological waste as a city or a town of 15,000 people, 1.5 times or more the size of Fairfield. And they're going to spread that manure in the people's, literally in their backyards. They don't need a health experts or a panel of public health experts to tell them that that's not right. They can stand up and say our health is threatened, our quality of life is threatened, and we have a basic right of self-defense, and we're standing up and saying no more to the CAFOs. I personally, and I'm not speaking on behalf of JFAN or SRAP of any of the others, but I personally would like to see a nationwide boycott of CAFO products. I'd like to see picket lines in front of grocery stores across the country and in front of restaurants and other places. And I'd like to see people carrying pickets that says, no more food contaminated by CAFOs, no more streams or air polluted by CAFOs, no more mistreatment of animals by CAFOs, no more economic lies in defense of CAFOs, no more CAFOs. You know, many people say that there's no hope, we can't win, that the economic and political powers against us are too strong. But folks, the future hasn't been determined yet. It's going to be influenced by what we do, what I do, what you do, what we do together is going to influence the future, if not determining. I believe that we each have a purpose in life, a path, not something to achieve, but a path that we're meant to walk. I don't think anybody's path is any more important than anyone else's path, that we're all equally important in serving the greater purpose or the greater good, if you will. And I think our greatest contribution any of us individually can make is simply to do our part and trust that others will do their part, and no matter how small it may seem, that we together can create a fundamentally better world, a world without CAFOs. I think we each have an ethical and moral compass that guides us on that path. And I think all we have to do is find the courage to do what in our hearts we know that we should do. To quote Wendell Berry, we do not have the right to ask that question, the question of whether we will succeed. We have to ask what's the right thing to do and go ahead and do it, and take no thought of tomorrow. Or in the words of an old Indian chief that was preparing the warriors to go out in battle, he said, "We will not be judged by the battles that we win or lose, but by the battles we choose to fight." We must let righteousness flow down like water and justice like a mighty stream. Regardless of the outcome, we must find the courage to do what in my heart that we know we should do. And for many of us, that means find the courage to stand up and say, no more to CAFOs. Thank you.